Hey everybody, Dan here with Pain Free You. Today's topic is going to be how a pattern interrupt can help you recover. So I'll get to that in a minute. Long day. I think this video is going to be really important for a lot of people. All right, so many of us have habitual responses to our symptoms. We immediately launch into fear, frustration, anger, sadness, despair, overthinking it, got to figure this out, why do I hurt? Doubt comes into play often. And it's very much a fear response. Same thing happens when we wake up and we've got the morning jitters, anxiety stuff going on. Boom. Habitual response. It's kind of the natural, what do we do when we're scared? Right? There we go. There's that yawn again. Well, I'm shooting this video at 11:30 at night, so long day. Been up since probably about 6. So I'll be shooting this video, uploading it, and going to sleep. So a pattern interrupt is a concept that's very much taught in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It is something that can interrupt the normal pattern or habitual response. And the goal of that is to actually change our emotional, mental, and behavioral state. So, what do we want to think about here? Well, first you want to identify your normal habitual response. When you have symptoms, what's your normal response? When symptoms increase, what's your normal response? And if you'd like to find a way to respond differently, you've got to break that habitual response. And so there's something called a pattern interrupt, and it's very useful to change that emotional, mental, or behavioral state. So what are some examples of pattern interrupts? Well, first of all, do something that's so different from your normal response that it kind of breaks the habit, right? So, for example, if your normal habit to anxiety, to the fearful thoughts, to the symptoms themselves, if the normal response, the habitual response is, oh my goodness, what's going on? Oh no, A couple examples. Smiling, laughing, splash cold water on your face, breathe, right? Humor. Joke about it. Take a power pose, like, dun, 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 Superman. Do a hard stop. And I've said that a couple of times in group coaching calls when somebody is, when I'm coaching somebody and they're going down a certain path, I'm like, hard stop. You can literally, when you notice your habitual pattern kicking in, you can go, hard stop. Come on, Dan, hard stop. We're not doing that, right? You can even just say something bizarre. When you notice your habitual fear pattern, just say something silly. Kittens, puppies, penguins, elephants. And your brain's going to go, wait, what? What are we doing? And it can be anything. Make up something silly. It could be as silly as, nope, not doing that. Nuh-uh, not doing that. We're not playing that again, right? Anything that you can do to break the typical habitual fear response. And every time you notice yourself going back into that fear, do it again. And then do it again. And then do it again. After a few times, what you're going to notice is the fear response loses its edge. It doesn't grab you by the collar and shake you as much, right? It's called a pattern interrupt. It's very useful in a technique called neuro-linguistic programming to kind of break people out of their state. It's also a very interesting tool in the world of sales. And so if you're interested, go to YouTube and look up pattern interrupt. And pattern interrupt to break bad habits could be an interesting thing to do. But I've really captured the essence of this here. And it can even be useful to get a kid to stop crying. You know, if a kid's like, cry, I want this, I want ice cream. Pattern interrupt. What can you do to interrupt that kid's pattern? You know, silly stuff. Kid's going to be like, what? You know, you do this pattern interrupt several times in a row. You can break somebody else out of a pattern. But more importantly, you can break yourself out of a pattern. So the first thing that you want to do is identify what your habitual responses are when symptoms are kind of, you know, being symptomatic and sensational or colorful. You know, if they're grabbing your attention and your normal response is fear, freak out, panic, learn to break that habit. And it's called a pattern interrupt. Because we're habitual beings. And we have a pattern. When the kids start crying, what's our typical pattern? Stop that. Right? Maybe we don't do it when a kid's crying, but maybe when they're misbehaving. Right? We have patterns with our spouses, with our boss, with our employees, with our kids. And if you've identified that some of these habitual responses are not ideal, we can interrupt our own patterns by doing something silly. You know, if your normal response is panic to symptoms, you can just go, And what I mean by this, is I know what's going on. And if you put a smile on your face, it's hard to be afraid and smile at the same time. Because this would be a fear smile. And I'm being goofy here, but literally, you know, your symptoms start climbing. You go, I know what's going on. My brain must be perceiving something dangerous. Something silly. Doesn't have to be, you know, anything meaningful or fantastic. You could even start singing, I'm off to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz, right? Anything that will break your pattern from the habitual panic or fear or catastrophic thinking, or I better go research this, or let me call my doctor, or I need to talk to somebody about this. I need to research this more. I need to jump on Facebook, or I need to watch some videos on YouTube. I need to practice somatic tracking or breathing or whatever, right? These are habitual responses, right? Whenever our symptoms are kind of kicking our butts, we automatically go into that habit, into that response, and it becomes very, very patterned. So if you want to break it, do something silly. I know what's going on. Sing a song. Smile. You know what you could also do? Wear a rubber band around your wrist, and every once in a while, snap it. Snap. Something to just go, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm doing the habit again. I want to break that. And so this stuff works. And I believe truly that if we can break out of our habitual response, our habitual fear response to our symptoms, can absolutely help us with our recovery. Because for many of us, we don't even recognize that we are in our habitual fear response to symptoms. We just don't. We just do it. Then we realize that I spent the whole day in fight or flight, worried about things and scared and thinking that this is going to be the rest of my life, and talking to anybody who will listen to us and asking for help 16 ways to Sunday. But we have the opportunity to break our own habitual response. But it first starts with identifying it. So ask yourself and write it down on a piece of paper. When things get a little bit sideways, symptom-wise, what's my natural response without even thinking about it? What do I do? Right? And by making a new pattern to interrupt the old habit and making it something fun, it's so different from our normal response. Because a lot of people have been listening to me for a while and they're like, oh, well, when I notice the symptoms, I'm going to calmly reassure myself. And in many cases, it's okay. I'm all right. There's nothing wrong with me. But sometimes that calm reassurance isn't terribly convincing because it's really, we're still scared. We're still coming from a place of fear. But if you can make your pattern interrupt to get you out of that habitual fear response, something funny or silly, come up with something. Share with me your results. Comment below. Let me know what you came up with. And then do it. And then do it often. You know, I used to, and I didn't even know it was a pattern interrupt, but I used to use the 2 words, I'm good. I'm good. Right? It can be simple. It doesn't have to be, fancy. Simple and short. I'm kind of liking this one. I know what's going on. With a smile. Because when you're smiling and you're doing something kind of goofy, it's hard to be afraid when you're doing that. So I want you folks to try this. It's called a pattern interrupt. Look up NLP pattern interrupt if you want to get a little of the technical details. But the whole concept here is we have a habitual response to something. And if we want to change our emotional, mental, and behavioral state, we need to interrupt the habitual pattern so that we can change our state. Because our state is how we navigate the world. And if our state, mental, emotional, and even our physical state and behavioral state is all about fear and like tension and right? It's not going to send the messages of safety. But if you can do something kind of fun and silly and goofy, at minimum, smile. Splash some cold water on your face. Run the faucet cold. Psh. That'll get your attention, right? Breathe. Tell yourself a silly joke. Get yourself a book of dad jokes. And next time you find yourself in that fear state, go grab the dad joke book and start reading through a bunch of them. Do anything to break your habitual fear state. Why is this important? Because this whole thing is run by the subconscious brain perceiving danger. And if we can get out of the fear state more often with this pattern interrupt, guess what's going to happen? Brain's not going to perceive as much danger, and things can start settling down. So, find something to break your own state. And this can even work with breaking other people's states. But try to make it a little bit funny, and see how this goes. I want you folks to try it. Comment back below. Let me know how you make out with this. But it's called a pattern interrupt, and it can be extremely useful for getting you out of your habitual, emotional, mental, and behavioral states and kind of shift you towards fun, humor. Get out of that fear state. So, going to wrap this one up. Hope everybody's doing fantastic. Hope it was a great weekend here in the United States. Monday is a holiday, Memorial Day. But for anybody who's wondering, yes, I am still running the group coaching program because I don't have any plans for the morning. So I'm going to be running that call as planned. And I guess that's all I've got for you. So love you all, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.